Hey guys, Kirk here, and thank you for joining me on a new video on the channel. In this video I want to cover the topic of roughness and creating some logic for a more advanced version of roughness. Now with this technique there is a couple of caveats that we need to take into account, and you have a few questions to ask yourself about this kind of logic and technique. But I've decided to do a tutorial on creating this kind of logic for roughness, as it can help with certain assets and materials itself. Essentially what I'm saying is I'm going to showcase the logic and what you can do with this roughness technique in a tutorial, and then it's down to you whether you use it based off the downsides, or shall I say based off the pros and cons to using the logic. I have seen it being used before. And it works on certain assets but not all of them, so I've done this tutorial as well, but with regards to our master material, we're probably not going to put it in there. And the master material is a series I'm doing on my channel where we're creating a master material for props and blah blah blah, but yeah, I just want to showcase creating this bit of roughness logic, but before we get started I do want to give a bit of insight into what I mean. So essentially this logic, what it's going to do is use our camera, or the camera vector, the length of our camera from the object should I say, and the normals of the asset and in world space, and it's going to allow us to adjust the roughness based off the camera and normals on an object. So essentially we're going to get a more detailed approach to roughness, and also give us the ability to change the amount of roughness which is being shown on the edge of a asset. The caveats to this are it's not expensive, but in terms of just roughness it can be expensive. And with the edge roughness, what it utilizes is your specular input, so you got to take that into account. Is your asset going to need specular? Are you using a wooden crate like I'm doing on the scene here in the tutorial? Because sometimes specular is needed in certain assets if you use specular correctly, that is. And you just got to ask yourself, is the expense of the logic? Do you need specular? Do you really need this amount of control over your roughness? Now it seems I'm kind of playing it down, but I'm not. It's a good technique to know, and it's one of them things that you should take in mind or save the video or whatever, and you could utilise this. Personally myself, I would utilise this kind of technique on glass or on metallic items like a barrel, or maybe a metal case or something like that, something that's got a lot of metallic on it and glass, like I've just said. They're the kind of times I would use this kind of technique, but yeah, I'm going on with myself now a bit, so let's get on to the subject in hand. So yeah, like I say, I've got a simple asset here from Quixel. It's not high detail, I think it is just a 2K or a 4K, not 100%, it's not nanite anyway. And at the minute it's just got its standard Quixel material on it, so I'm going to create a new material. So I'm going to come to my content drawer, I'm going to go to materials. This is the folder structure for our master material. We're just going to use this testing folder, and in here I'm going to right click and get a new material. I'm not going to use my naming convention because it's just a test, so we're going to type test dash advanced roughness. Go ahead and press enter. We're going to right click on that straight away and create a material instance. We'll just drag the material instance onto our crate. It'll stay like that for now until we add some textures. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to come back to the scene because I want to use these textures. I'm going to click on the details tab, and in the section where it's static mesh, we're just going to hit the little plus icon with a folder, and that'll send our content drawer to where them textures are for this asset. I'm going to highlight all three and drag them straight into our test roughness material file, folder, whatever. So yeah, we've got these. We've got our albedo. We can plug that straight in. We've got our normal. We can plug that straight in. Now our albedo and normal, we don't really need them. I'm just doing it for the sakes of the asset. So we'll put that up here. I'm going to right click the metallic and promote to a parameter. And in here, I'm going to set this as a 0.1, 0.12345 as a minimum and 1 as a maximum. We'll slot that right in there. And now all we're left with is this texture. In this texture, our roughness is in the green channel, which is there. So we're going to utilise the out pin, our green out pin, this one. And we're going to build off this now. So if I hit apply with this, our asset is back to normal now. This is using the material we just created. Like so. So let's build some roughness. So first of all, what I want to do is to give us some basic controls for our roughness. So I'll promote this out pin to a parameter and put it down here. We'll set the default at 0.7. That's just a standard roughness parameter. I'd like to build some detail, so if I hold L on the keyboard and left click, get a lerp in here and pull that into the alpha, and then I'm going to duplicate this and call this roughness max. I'll duplicate that again and call this roughness min. So we get a minimum and a maximum amount of roughness control. This would go down as detailed roughness because we're getting detailed control on our roughness. And we could simply switch between these. So if we drag off the output of our lerp and get a switch, put a static switch parameter, and we'll just go enable detail roughness, like so. So if we're true, we're going to be using this setup here, and if we're false, we're just going to use a standard roughness amount. Oh, hello. So that's that setup. Now essentially this is what I'd have set in my master material for just detailed control. I hit apply now with this. We'll go and check this out. We'll open our material instance like so, and then here we have our basic controls. So you can go one with metallic. It's completely metallic now, even though it doesn't look like it, but it is because our roughness is set quite high. If I reduce this roughness amount, you'll see now we're getting that metallic effect on our crepe, and we can increase this to increase the amount of roughness involved in the asset. Pretty standard stuff. And then we can come down here and enable detailed roughness. And essentially what this is going to do, if I set the minimum to 0.2, you'll see we're getting a bit of shine on there. If I come to about here, we can see the reflection of our directional light. And I can just increase this now, and we're getting that detailed roughness. I can increase this, and that's more inside the asset, on the inside of the texture, whereas the minimum is on the outside of the texture, like so. So generally I set this to about 1.2, 1.3, and I can increase this like so. I've got a nice bit of detailed roughness. So I'll put them back to default. Well, don't want that, we want that at 0.2. And now we're back to normal. Okay, so let's get on to building this other bit of logic. What we need with this now, we need to control the amount of roughness we apply to our asset using the normals. So for this, we're going to use a pixel normal in world space. This node can be quite expensive, but we'll clamp it on the outside. This is something you've got to keep in account when doing this. And then we're going to use what's called a camera vector in world space. And we essentially just need to calculate both lengths of our pixel normal and our camera vector. So for that we can use what's called a dot product. And this node essentially calculates the length of a vector, two vectors, and outputs the average, like so. And then we're going to get a linear interpolate or a lerp, and we'll just use that in our alpha, like so. With this, we do need our roughness input, and we'll put that into the B slot. And then we need a scalar parameter, and we'll call this roughness. Spell that wrong, haven't I? Roughness. Or did I? Normal. Now, I don't think that's a right name. We'll call this roughness master. Yeah, we'll just set this at a default value of 0.4 and then 0.12345, and that slider minimum is the minimum amount it will go. It will not surpass that in a negative value, and 0.50 and a 1 is the minimum value before it goes to 0 and then into negative numbers. And then the maximum, I'm going to set this quite high as it's normals, so I'll give it a 3. Essentially, God, it's been so long since I've done this. Multiply, so we're going to get a multiply node. And we need to multiply this into the A, and we also need to put our roughness value into it from our texture. I'll do that. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm glad I've remembered somewhere. So this now, I'll drag off here and get a switch parameter again. And we can call this enable roughness. Oh, wait there. Advanced roughness. Okay. And this essentially now we can plug into our roughness, like so. So we've got enable advanced roughness as a space there. I don't want to see that. Do that. So this will enable our advanced roughness. If we don't want to use advanced roughness, we could simply fall back to the detailed roughness. So I've got a gap in there as well. If anyone watches my videos, you know that I do like to organise things. In essence, if you organise your logic up, especially when applying for a role in the gaming industry or some sort of industry that uses this kind of stuff, I don't know why you'd work in the game industry, but that's just a personal preference. But having it organised where someone viewing it can clearly indicate what's going on will give you a better chance at getting a role in the gaming industry. Okay, so now we're going to test this roughness master out. So if I hit apply, we'll jump in here, open our material instance. You can see I've got enable advanced roughness. If I do this, it gets rid of the roughness detail, but then it adds this in. And I can see straight away it's being affected there by that camera vector, the roughness there. You can see the blodges of the normals here. And that's all set at 0.4. If I increase this, decrease it, it's quite strong actually. I don't think we need it set to 3, but as you can see, if I slide it right down to minimum, it won't go past that. But I can see straight away, you can tell there straight away with that roughness on the normals. If I leave it there, I can spin the camera around and get some nice roughness looking stuff there based off our camera. Okay, so that's that. It works pretty well. what I want to do now is enable edge roughness. So if I highlight this, C on the keyboard, and we'll call this roughness master. So essentially this will just dominate any roughness I put in here, unless I disable it. So we're going to use these again. We'll duplicate this, but that's not going to go there. What I need to do now is to get the length of our normal vectors. And there's a node for that. It's called... what's it called? Or is it vector length? No, it's not vector length because that's a function. Oh, I forgot what it's called. Vertex normal in world space. I kind of forgot what I needed then. I'm sure it's vertex normal in world space. Anyway, I'm going to duplicate the dot product. I'm going to put that pixel normal in there. The vector normal in world space in both of these. Like so. So essentially now our camera is working alongside with the vertex normals, which are like little pins that stick up. It's the direction of our normals, essentially. By control that, what's the world space vertex normal, it can only be used in a material input. That's our expected vertex shader. It says that, but you can use it and you don't have to have a vertex shader. Okay, so we're going to need lerp. We're going to need a couple of them actually. I want a roughness min and max as well. I'm going to duplicate them, and these can be called edge roughness max and edge roughness min. Now this minimum is going to be a 0.2 and the maximum, I'm going to set this at a 1.5 for there, and then put this into our A, and this can go into the A of that lerp. And essentially now we can use our pixel normal and vertex normal mask into the alpha of each of these. Now I've seen another artist do this before. I'm not 100% why. I think you get more control, but in your lerps in the B input, if you set this to a 0.5, I've tested this myself. There's not a massive change, so I tend to go for 0.3. And essentially what it is when you adjust your min and max on the edge roughness, with the B input being set to 0.3, you're giving yourself more leeway than 0.5 values, which it's hard to explain, but it does work. But I tend to stay with the 0.3. 0.5 means you're half and half, and only the values here can be set to a maximum of 0.5 or maybe 1.5. But yeah. So for these, we need to lerp these two together as well. And then for this alpha, we'll use the camera vector. Oh, hello. Like so. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate this switch. Like so, and put that into the true statement. You'll notice both of these switches go to the same colour. It's the exact same name, so when I enable this, this will be enabled at the same time as well. I'll drag this over a little bit. Drag these in a little bit. We'll just put a little pin in here, so we can clearly see what's going on here. We'll drag out a little bit. Like I've just stated, guys, it's very important that people can see what you're doing. And we'll do that. Like so. Okay. There we go. I do like to organise things up a little bit. Okay, so now we've set that. What we could do is drag off this as well and put that in the false. So it falls back to this if we're not using this advanced roughness. We'll get this and we'll call this edge roughness So, and like I stated at the beginning of the video, people, that this technique does utilise your specular input, and we put this edge roughness into the specular. The reason for that is specular is more or less aimed at your shadows here that are on the edges, and because we're using this technique in the specular, it'll aim for that area on the asset. So I think that's it. Let's give this a whirl. It looks okay straight away, which is great. I'm going to open our material instance. We get our advanced roughness straight away. If I reduce this now to 0, what you need to do, guys, is you want to be watching here where these cracks are, these indentations where your specular would sit, and like down this side of the front face here. That's what changes these values. So if I've got a 0 now, put 1, 2, 3, 5, 55, you'll start seeing that change. 3, 5, 10, 20. You can see the edge of our asset there is getting brighter the more I add roughness to it. Put 0, it's going to get dark because it's adding more metallic to it. If I set this to a 1, a 2, and 3 maybe, and then we've got our minimum, hit 0. Now this should affect like around this area here, this amount. So if I increase this, just start increasing it, and you can see there straight away, if you watch this area here, it'll start going white. Looks like a white, but it's just the roughness kicking in. And you'll start seeing it there, starting to kick in. And now we've applied roughness around the edges of our asset. You can see here that it's all bright and shiny, whereas on the edges it's now rough. But I can increase the roughness master, and that can match it as well. Right there. Okay. So, as it stands there, that is it. Let's reduce that roughness minimum. You can clearly see that change then. I increase this to a fairly large number, like 18. If I set it to default, you can see the change there. If I set this to 20, you can see the edging there. Changing 50, 10, 20, 30, 50, 60. Yeah. So it's clearly working. And that's about that. And that's pretty much it. So, as you can see, this is our logic that's been worked here for our roughness. We're using our normals and our camera vector to control the amount of roughness, especially based off our length. As you can see, if you watch the side wall, how it's shiny because of our camera vector. If I move away, you see how it gets darker now? It's adjusting the roughness based on where our camera is. You could use position, but your vertex normals won't work very well. And it'll just, all your vertex, like all this where it shades up, will just be like if this was set to 100. Just be like that. Even at a low value, that horrible normal issue. So even if I set it higher, 200, this is the issue you would have if you used, I think, camera position instead of a camera vector. Because your vertex normals don't work that well with that. Okay, so that is it. That's the advanced roughness tutorial over. Like I stated at the beginning of the video, guys, it's completely down to you whether you use this kind of technique. Like I said, you can use it in glass. But as you can see, it's quite expensive. Also, I forgot, before we finish, you can use saturates here. Use a saturate node. It's probably better to do that, to be honest, because we're using such high values with our camera vector and normals events, or whatever they're called, nodes. Hit apply. We should get a little bit of a better result from this. Yeah. So always remember to clamp it, so it's between 0 and 1. So yeah, like I was saying, it's completely down to you if you want to use this kind of logic. I mean, keep in mind you're losing your specular input, and do you really need this amount of control over roughness? I'll leave that down to you. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial, guys, for this week. Next week we're going to jump back onto my master material and finish it off by doing a couple of videos regarding the normals and setting them up. And then after that we are going to go to the Build World series and finish that off as well. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye.